Welcome to Conversations with Life. I'm here with Keith and Sochi. This is Cedar, Steve, Cedar. And today we're going to take on the topic of the soul. What is the soul?
I love how we just take on such, chill, minor topics.
They're easy.
We're not worried about it. Just the fucking soul and virtue and everything that ever meant anything to anyone ever. It's fine.
Right. The soul is interesting, and it's a lot. We can just kind of touch on some things here today. But one of the things is that the soul in a material world isn't seen. Our transcendence, what I call spirit, is seen because people out there worshiping, they're speaking and wearing the things that they worship with, and they are meditating and doing yoga and transcending in all the ways. But the soul isn't seen. The results and the process of soul is all there is.
So I guess I'm struggling to definitions right now, right? Because when I think of my spirit and my soul, they're synonymous. Yeah. They sound the same, right?
Yeah.
And when you're talking about my spirit is seen, it sounds like the results and the outcome of my spirituality are seen, right? Like if I wear a crucifix or I do yoga on a paddleboard in the lake, right? Mm-hmm. You can see my spirituality, or at least the effects of it. And so I'm like, okay, how are these things different? Mm-hmm. And what is the soul if it's not the spirit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was kind of in the same line. And, we've done this whole soul and spirit thing, and we have a podcast on soul and spirit. So we've defined it a little bit in the past, but I think we're talking about maybe something a little different. I don't know. I'm really curious about where this goes today, just from our conversation earlier. And also that I came into, this spiritual awakening or whatever with a similar idea that my soul and my spirit were the same thing. And so working with Steve in this whole soul and spirit concept has been fascinating and beautiful. But also, another school that I've been with is kind of the school of the Templars or the mystery school or whatever. And they talk about soul landing, bringing your soul into your body and, birthing your soul into the earth and helping the earth's soul awaken. And I remember talking to you about that, and you're like, wait, what are you talking about, soul landing? And so it's really fun that already we kind of have this history of back and forth and a little bit of pushing around this definition of soul. So I'm super excited to hear what the fuck are you talking about today, Steve?
I feel like that every single time you guys come over.
Yeah, the easy definition of soul and spirit. Spirit is what we connect to and how we connect and transcend to whatever we call God, a higher principle, love, divinity,
the divine,
the essence of our highest ideal, right? So that's spirit. We're connecting to. And soul is where we connect from, right? So from and to, and that goes all the way down to a place that isn't a place. That's our most essential self.
Okay, so the soul is within me and the spirit is something that I'm working toward.
Yeah, spirit is in you too, but it's the aspect of you that's working towards transcendence.
Okay.
So soul deepens. To find soul, you can picture all of life in this way, is that it goes up and there's no limit. There's eternity, infinity up, and there's also infinity down, right? So there's no smallest particle.
Right. Okay.
You find the smaller particle, you're always going to find a smaller particle.
We're in quantum realms.
This comes back around, yeah. So soul exists in something, and our essence exists in something that we can't really define, although that we know it comes from what we would call our center, or we would say down. It's always this down place.
Right. It's grounding. It's the earth. It's connection. I feel like it's like a tree, kind of like planting your roots versus sprouting for the sky. Like if your roots are really surface level, good luck, finding enlightenment, really, kind of a vibe.
Totally. In one way, you can say that soul and spirit are the same thing.
Right. It's all the tree.
It's all the tree, and it's all our meaning path, right? But
it's also all the tree, and then the tree is all the earth, and the earth is all the all, and it's all consciousness. So like we're making distinctions every day.
the way we work with it is very different,
Okay.
right? So spirit tends to be practice, it tends to be discipline, it tends to be organized. Soul tends to be messy, it's unknowable. So if you want to maybe some models look like this. There's the self in the middle. Mm-hmm. Right? And then there's our ego, personality here, right? And then maybe spirit, transcendence, right? On this side.
Okay.
On the other side of self is the soul, and there's a wall here. We don't have access. I cannot say to my soul, "Hey soul, how you doing?" And it's not there. It's not verbal. It's so essential that it's not verbal. So the Jungians, for instance, communicated with the soul and thought about this in terms of dreams. They think of dreaming, especially some dreams, as soul language. Dreaming, synchronicities, images, myth, metaphor, body, experience on the earth. Those are the things that speak to us from this kind of what we might call soul, a soul language, which isn't something that can be interpreted easily. It doesn't. There's no definition. There's no boxes. It's too messy. It's too essential for that.
It's so interesting because like the way I've always seen the world, right? And I don't know if I'm like everyone else or if I'm weird, but for me, I'm like, okay, anything of myself, I can understand. Anything of the divine is by nature undefinable. Mm-hmm. Right. But see, like you said a sentence, you were like, okay, the spirit is definable, it's structure, it's clear. And then the soul is what's messy. And I'm like, how like bass backwards is the whole world? Mm-hmm. If we're sitting here going, I know myself, I'm fine. And the spirit is the thing that I've always looked at people like religions and been like, oh, you're trying to define God. Good luck, dumbass. Like that's the unknowable. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at it and I'm being like, how can it be that both sides, and I guess the infinite thing is where I'm going to go there, both sides being equally unknowable, because like spirituality is messy and lacks structure and is crazy, but just in like a different way, I guess, right?
I don't think spirituality is that way. I think the way that people, and like, depending on how you define spirituality, but transcendence always moves to a point, and there might be a deity or a concept that people move that through or to, but essentially it moves to we feel like we're doing
we're
this.
Refining.
Yeah, we're refining. So you're moving up to transcend this experience. Mm-hmm. Soul has no interest in transcending this experience. Mm-hmm. It is all experience, and like I said, there is nothing else but soul. But we don't know it. So like we don't know why we're here. We don't breathe ourselves. We're being breathed. We're being lived from that essence place. There's nothing else. But we then put on top of that self and then ego.
Would you say that spirit process has a goal that's attainable?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I would say that,
Okay.
That
I can live with that.
At least I think it has a state.
Right.
I think it's looking for a particular state.
Like most religions have like you get to heaven, or like LDS is like you attain godhood, or like whatever.
Well, what
it
if
is.
you were just like trying to lose weight?
Yeah,
I want to be 150 pounds.
Right, that would be
a spirit process, because I would be like focusing in.
Well, you're also denying some experience of the world, right? You're denying some soul to achieve some goal, right? Like you're denying a cheesecake.
To everything except for this.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't say that you're denying soul. I would say that you're taking the messy process that's there and you're connecting to yourself in a particular way.
Huh.
So here's the funny thing. So if you listen to what we call the soul psychologists or the depth, this is called depth psychology. Depth psychology is the science of the soul, I guess you could say, is if it can be scientized.
Sure.
And I would say maybe most psychology is trying to construct a healthy ego, or maybe better, good psychology is trying to work with a good self, and the self in the middle of that. Now, we actually are absolutely divinity. We have transcendence just in us. We just move towards that, right?
Right.
But we're here, and this is interesting. Think about the world. Anything can happen here. People are being raped and killed and tortured as we speak in this moment. That's fucking nuts.
Yeah.
And a part of us does not want to look at that. Right? But that's what the soul does. In Soul Land, anything is possible. Everything is there. All of us. The rapist in me is in Soul Land, right? The violent in me, the one who would kill somebody just for fun, is there. Why is that in me? Because it's happening. It's there in the world. Mm-hmm. So soul is rough. Also, the most beautiful harmony, the most, exquisite joy is there in that process. That's also me. So when I take on soul, I have to realize that I'm taking on the full energy of human being, right? Now, how does that express most healthfully through me? Well, soul, once we have it, moves towards transcendence, right? It takes all that fertilizer that soul has and it makes it into something. It moves towards something.
Sure. I mean, the purpose of the roots is to grow the tree.
It's to grow the tree. And then the tree, in the world tree, you see these roots and tree kind of coming back together. Mm-hmm. And then there's that connection between the two. And
which is very similar to what you were talking about with like the no smallest particle, it all just loops back on itself kind of theory, at least.
Yeah.
So I have another soul concept, and I'm wondering if these are just two completely different maps or if there's a way that these weave in. Mm-hmm. So in the mystery school tradition, we have almost like 3 layers of self. Mm-hmm. We've got a personality, which is our current expression on the planet in space and time in this physical body. Mm-hmm. And it's all mixed up with our ego. Mm-hmm. And then we have our soul, which is not all the way into this kind of monadic void, which would be the 3rd level, which is just all consciousness, right? Mm-hmm. We have this monad that's just conscious, pure consciousness. Then we have this like in between that has maybe even its own personality and its own history through possibly different lifetimes. And it's like almost like pure experience of something that's still separate and unique from consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think that's contradictory to my conception or the Jungian conception of the soul at all.
So I mean, sorry, just real quick, layman coming in again, right? Uh-huh. So like we've defined consciousness as everything being everything all of the time. So how is anything separate from consciousness? Like that's just like the first question popped in my head when you said that was like, and Steve's like, there's no contradiction. And I'm like, except can anything be separate? And like, can soul really be separate from spirit if it's all one, right? That's where I'm getting stuck, I think. And like, we need labels and separation and containers and conceptions and all the things to function. Because if everything is everything all the time, my head's gonna fucking explode. Right. But like in the world, in the definition of like, okay, this is how I can operate with this thing with my mind. In that way, it's separate from consciousness. But in the way that is what consciousness actually is.
Well, I think you can
same,
experience different states of, like, you can experience yourself, if you will, in that field of all consciousness. You know, certain plant medicine experiences can give you this, like, where any concept of separation or self disappears. Mm-hmm. And I would call that more in like that monadic sphere. So you can identify as the monad, if you will, you know.
Okay.
You can identify as soul, which is it's less fixed in time and space than the identity that you have as Keith.
Right.
Here.
Right, because if I'm every element of human experience, then I can't just be Keith, because Keith isn't going around murdering people for the fun of it. right? So like I am by definition limited, even just by a physical body. So like we talk about being more of a soul person or being more of a spirit person. We've talked about that on the show a few times now. So I guess like that's going to affect how I interact with both things. And if even the soul is moving towards spirituality, should I be looking for, like, I would say personally, I actually don't really know if I'm more of a spirit person or a soul person. I just like started that sentence without actually knowing myself. But like, let's say I was more of a soul person, right? Should I be looking for ways to increase my spirituality, my spirit, or should I be looking for ways to honor my soul and that'll just get me there? Like, you know, it sort of feels like the same trap that most labels can get me into.
Well, remember that consciousness is always leaving itself to find itself.
Right.
That's the only way that consciousness can work. Otherwise, it'd just be one unity in the sky, and we'd all be just jiving there, and that we would never know ourselves, and God would never know itself. So consciousness has to leave itself to find itself. So it bodies. There's light and dark. There's masculine and feminine. All these ways in which it leaves itself to find itself. Every other polarity is a problem. And soul and spirit is the way in which, essentially, we can use those words, embodiment versus transcendence.
Okay.
Is there, right? And so you remember, being your own individual self is very important because it gives you the opportunity to realize that you're not actually separate from anything.
Mm-hmm.
And at the soul level, that's the real experience, right? So the universe winks at us and shows us that we're not actually beings that are separate, being different, you know. So Carl Jung's famous experience is he has a dream of a fox. And the next day, you know, he's talking to a patient about a dream of a fox. And he's walking down this path in this garden, and this fox jumps over the hedge, looks at them for like a minute, and then jumps back over, you know. Okay, what's the synchronicity? How likely is that, you know, to happen?
Yeah.
And you're like going, and these things happen to me all the time. I don't know about you, but you're like, whoa, that couldn't have happened. And it also just is normal.
Well, it's interesting. It's like I was reading a book, right? I don't know if you guys know Brandon Sanderson, very famous Utah fantasy author, right? Every LDS kid with a pencil wants to be this guy, right? Has a novella called Warbreaker, and it talks about the soul a lot, right? Your breath is your soul, right? Mm-hmm. And it talks about that you can trade breath and give it away and all these things and use it to make magic. It's a whole thing. It's a really kind of cool world mechanic. But the breathless, people who give away their breath, they lose a few things. People who gain a lot of breath, they gain things, right? So if you gain a lot of breath, you get like the ability to see like perfect color and have perfect pitch, and all, like, you connect with things so much more richly, and you get a life sense. You can sense people around you, right? And then people who are the breathless, you lose it completely, right? So you know that feeling you get when you're being watched? That like, oh, it feels weird, you know? Or even someone's just like thinking about you really hard and you kind of feel a bit odd, you can feel it, right? When we talked about, like, we're going to talk about soul, that's immediately what came to mind. We've all felt that. We've all felt that we're being watched. We've all like been sitting in a place and been like, I can feel like someone's eyes on me, and you turn around, someone's eyes are on you, right? That to me is like the core evidence that we are not separate from anything ever, right? Like you can feel someone else's eyes on you. There is no reason, there is no sense that you have, no physical element of your body that should feel when someone else's eyes are looking, like there's nothing, right? And yet we do. So what is that if not connection? Right? And it's kind of like this whole idea that you're talking about of like, that's the soul to me, is that like connection to all of it. You know, like deja vu and that perception of being watched, and what you're talking about with the, like, you know, the fox jumping out of the hedge. It's like that connection to me is like part of an unexplainable piece of who I am. Like I just don't have any idea of why that's a thing.
Yeah, because things happen. They're happening. They're already in motion. Time isn't the thing. Here's the thing about the soul. It's timeless. So everything's already happened.
Right, we've talked about that before, and memories being
Yes, memories
wonky.
and dreams. This is all known. Now, if you want to get a message to yourself from your soul place, how do you do it? Well, you invent some little thing that happens, and then the personality goes, right? And get back to this, the personality ego. That's kind of like that self ego mix, and we want to move towards our essence, and mind the ego, but not kill it,
Yeah.
So to me, say personality, that's that. And then the monad is interesting because the monad is the absolute singularity. It's really not a thing in our experience. We can only intend towards it.
Mm-hmm.
But the monad is also the most powerful force in the world because it's the singularity. It's the thing that it's the black hole. It's the nothing. It's everything. It's the place where everything comes from. And then right next to the monad would be the expression of whatever is at our essence, right? And that bursts from the nothing because it has to. Otherwise, again, we don't exist. Otherwise, consciousness doesn't know itself, right? Now, what's beyond the monad? What happens?
I mean, doesn't something have to happen? Because nothing can have, the beginning and end and infinite things.
It's the nothing that creates the everything, right?
Yeah, I mean, we call it the dark light, or we call it the everything nothing. We call,
Everything,
it's
nothing. Yeah. And the mind breaks at that point. We have no concept. We have no concept that fits. Right? And to me, that's why soul is unknowable fully, is because there's no concept that fits it. Like we are at our essence, we are unknowable because we can't quite get back to the place where we came from. Right?
Well, right, yeah.
Because we're not supposed to, but we should have connection with that, right? So soul work is fascinating. In soul work, you often pay attention to dreams, images, synchronicities. Again, these are the things. By the way, soul people should be affirmed in their soul path.
So this is coming back to your question.
Yeah.
And then go on a spirit journey. Find a transcendent practice. Find a discipline that will hold them. Find a community that will see them and understand them, right? Because soul people get lost and they wander and they die often, and they OD or they get lost in that messy world, which is really messy and really
there's so much gravity there.
So much gravity, and it's chaotic. It doesn't make linear sense. It doesn't work well with a day job, So
fair enough.
So will take you out. One of my favorite books on this, Care of the Soul, by Thomas. Good gosh, Thomas More. Yeah, Thomas More. Yeah. And he's this, this very gentle. I would say, I can't remember what he's in, or I think he's a monk or has an affiliation in a Christian order. And he writes in Care of the Soul in the intro like this, he doesn't say it in these words. He's like, this will fuck you up.
Yeah.
If you're going to go on this soul, if you're going to go on the soul journey, you got to know that no job or relationship or situation in your life is safe.
Wow.
If you want to contact your soul, all the things that your ego constructed and your personality constructed might be blown apart. However, if you don't do this, it will do you. Eventually, it will catch up to you, right? So you can take this on, but I'm warning you.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like it's like one of those things that you can take it on, but if you do, you're gonna blame yourself. Like you only have yourself to blame. If you let it happen to you, it's like you can be like a victim, right?
Yes.
Which is safe. Like for me, when you get like it'll fuck you up. Like I don't want to do that, and then you're like it'll do it to you. I'm like but then it won't be my fault. Like,
Nice.
But then I also won't have direction. I won't have path or guidance. It'll just be a chaotic thing that happens.
It feels beautiful to be with it.
Yeah.
And to be intentional about it.
Fair.
It's still going to surprise the hell out of you, no matter how much intentionality you put into it. The soul path will always surprise you. It will always feel like a mystery. But
and it's what keeps life interesting, honestly. Like, what am I? What is going on here?
Right. I mean,
if I have that splayed out like a butterfly pinned up and just like, this is the species, that's not that interesting. But there's a living connection to all that is, and the whole mystery of consciousness is there in me, in my form, in the way that life is happening with me. That keeps everything interesting all the time. It's an endless stream of energy that is dangerous and wonderful all at the same time.
Right. And if you're in the spirit, then does that mean that you're like completely detached from the earth? Like if you're a spirit person, you have to then ground yourself in your spirit and go on a soul journey, right? We talked about that.
Yes.
And so it's like, okay, I've actually got to touch down and connect with the world and like figure out experiences in life and things like that. Sort of an interesting.
Yeah. And all these constructs that you've built in your spirit path are going to have, jewels and gifts that will support you in your soul journey. But a lot of those constructs will fall apart. But at the end, you'll still have like, okay, I thought that I needed to, be a certain weight or read a certain number of books or do a certain career path, and I achieved that. And there's an identity there that is probably going to have to collapse in the soul journey, but you get to keep the experiences that you gained. And the jewels that you gained, and they magically become these little things that you're like, oh, that's why I needed that. That's why my soul took me on that spirit journey. It's because I was gonna need that later on in this deeper soul journey.
Okay.
Spirit relies on practice. Soul relies on myth for its meaning. Spirit, it feels safe. Ultimately, it feels ordered and together.
Right, it has structure.
And there's a lot more reason to it. There's a reason you're doing stuff versus, I think of something like playing in the mud.
Mm-hmm.
There's no someday in the future, I'm going to be able to say that I developed da-da-da because I played in the mud.
Right. There's no practical
but there's
application.
Something that's so delicious and alive and essential and soul nourishing about playing in the mud.
Yeah. Walt Whitman is soul. If you ever want a soul guy, it just connects there naturally. Go read Whitman, because that guy is just rolling in it. He talked to, what she said kind of spurred that, because there's this incident where he recounts, and he's just walking down the stream and he sees this bog, and he just goes and strips his clothes off and just rolls in the muddy earth, making love to the earth,
Okay.
And he's ecstatic in the earth, That's a spirit person doesn't do that. They might go look over the bog and they'll sit there and they'll think, this is a really beautiful place. I really enjoy this, the way that all this goes, you see? And it's a very,
it's like appreciative but separate.
Yeah. And both paths are necessary, and they're the same path. They're just aspects of it. The soul gets neglected a lot because we live in a world in which material progress is the ultimate, and that tends towards spirit progresses. Our religions that have accompanied the materialist push have been very spirit. Mm-hmm. And when we encounter other cultures who are doing soul stuff like dancing, or fucking clapping in church, or playing the guitar.
How dare they?
I couldn't play my guitar at church because it was not appropriate. I guess you can do that now, but
too soul,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just fucking no. It has to be an organ or a piano,
or a violin.
Fucking ridiculous, right?
Full strings.
It's just ridiculous. How and please don't play a blues note. Oh my, right?
Okay.
So here's the essence of this, and why we're talking about it, why we're digging into soul, and maybe we'll dig into spirit sometime. Although I find it's been done. Yeah. Is that most of us are not. We're doing something else other than soul. Mm-hmm. We're living out here rather than in here. And so we're doing practices. Jung mentions, or one of the people in that book anyway, mentions political activism, for instance. So people that get super offended because Dionysus scene looked like the Last Supper, for instance.
Oh, I love that. that was so fun for me.
All of them.
I was like, are you aware that even if you do want it to be the Last Supper, everybody there was wearing a dress too? Like, I don't like that.
Right?
They were, and they all had long hair, and they were unacceptable humans to their environment.
Yeah, they were.
And it was
they
a
were
painting.
hookers
It was a
and
work
fishermen.
of art.
Yeah.
All right. So, but if you want to be a political activist and worry about stuff like that, you are not in yourself.
Right.
You're out here, right? And those, even if you have a worthy cause, right? I could, for instance, want liberation of my homeland in the Ukraine, right? I could like fight for that or something,
Right. Advocate.
and I could lose myself there. Anybody that has a lot of those ideals tend to side on spirit, and they tend to get used, and they keep us from our vital energy gets out here in the tension of the world, and we lose the vital energy from here. Now, but if I'm living soul and someone tries to take my freedom, they're not going to be able to. I'm already free.
Because your freedom and your energy is not contingent upon the outside.
I'm not living out here.
Right.
But if you get somebody that's out here, and especially, Facebook and the whole world, kind of tends itself towards these outside
We're all
battles
living out, yeah.
that really are reflections of what we should be doing. Should is a stupid word, but what we can be doing here.
Inside.
And that's where our energy meets the world in this mystery. And we want it to be honored. We want innocence to be honored. We want people to be fed. We want, good things to happen. Artists are often soul people because they are seeing the images that are coming through them, the energies that are coming in, and putting them into something that's not verbal often, or if it is verbal, that subverts the verb. The words
Not necessarily logical.
into an experience that takes the logic
Not
out
rational
of it, right?
necessarily, yeah.
Poetry is a great place for soul to meet itself. Some of my favorite poets, soul poets, from Emily Dickinson to Robert Frost to David White and Wild Geese Mary Oliver. I was going to mention that poem in the last one. You do not have to be good, right? That's how she starts the Wild Geese poem. It's such a beautiful poem, and then ends up in this experience of seeing these geese just go where they go. And that's another thing nature does so really well, because it just is what it is. There's no self or ego really in an animal. It's there a little bit, but very little. It's just there running on impulse, and so we get a cue from that. We get the experience of not just being our soul, but we experience our soul because we can get out of it. We can be a personality. We can fight for causes, or be out here in some kind of tension or transcendence.
Well, and we can believe in a construct of value and goodness. Even if we could say a tree is trying to be a tree, which that's questionable by itself. But even if we could say a tree is trying to be a tree, it's not trying to be a better tree than any other trees.
Yeah, it's not like that little fucker's gonna die and I'm gonna take this whole forest.
You'll go into a forest and you'll see this huge variety of tree expressions, some healthier than others, whatever, and it's all just glorious. It's beautiful. It's touching.
So I want to because one of the things that we have a tendency to do, as people, is we listen to someone extol the virtue of one thing and we assume that the other thing is awful, right? And so when I'm listening to you guys talk about the soul and getting involved in this conversation, thinking of it as an anchoring point to go on a spirit journey and be like, the spirit journey is not bad, but it's bad when you go, or not bad, but it's when you go to that place, either place, exclusively. Am I getting that right? Because we've talked about polarities being dangerous if you exist exclusively in one side of a polarity.
Yes.
And so with the soul too, I have to assume living exclusively in the soul means I never get out of the mud, right? And
and I think
is that right?
Not
or
even
is that
necessarily living. It's the identity. To me, that's where you get in trouble with polarities. Is when you start to form an idol of yourself, if you will, or an image of yourself, or a construct that even it's even a little dangerous to say, I'm a soul person.
Right. And I'm
or
just
I'm
like,
a
I don't
spirit
want to.
person, because you can feel your ego get excited, like, oh, what
which
does
one
that
am I?
mean? You know,
And what does it mean about me?
Which
And then
one's
you're in
better?
trouble.
And
It's affirming when I tell some people this, because I see spirituality on that path, right? I grew up a soul person in a spirit religion, right?
Right.
And so I sing all these people who are really good at transcendence, and I'm just like, I am messy as hell, and I can't do that.
Yeah.
My sexuality will not be boxed like you want to box it, you know. I am experiencing things that are really weird and odd, and you want me to experience something that's regular and lessened, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, you know, but without transcendence, soul path is going to kill you. You lose your identity there, right? So it's good to work with the ego to lessen the energy it contains, to attune it, etc. It's not bad. It's not good to destroy it wholly.
Right.
It's not at first, but you do want to lose the energy and give more to your essence. It's just that what's there is going to, and by nature is going to challenge you. Because remember, consciousness is trying to leave itself to find itself. So from its essence, it's built your life in order to take you away from yourself. Right? And so,
I mean, we extol the idea of losing yourself in a cause, right? It's like it's a beautiful thing to lose yourself in a cause. I'm like, I like me.
yes, yeah.
Why do I have to lose me? Could I not just do that thing and also not, like, you know, still exist? And lots of religions do that same thing, right? Sacrifice the self for the whole feels very spirit versus soul.
It is very, but really, what it is if you live soul, you're already sacrificed.
Huh.
And you've got to find a safe place for that, because it's wild. You know, all the energies that are closer to your essence are wild. You know, we use often sexuality to work with spirituality, like you said, such a tantra, because we have a big issue with it in the West. And our life force energy is happening there, right? And if we can meet ourselves in that consciously, we can meet ourselves anywhere. So really what any good container is creating a soul, what we do anyway, creating a soul experience with a really good spirit container to hold it, right? And I think that's just a good metaphor for any human being. It's crazy in here. It's nuts. It's juicy. It's nonlinear. You know, it's madness. You know, madness and soul are very aligned.
Okay.
In fact, genius and madness are very close, because a lot of times what people are doing with genius is they're tapping down to their essence, and there's everything there. All the information, everything in the world is there, and they can make connections that no other person could make because they're so freaking deep in there. But also they risk, you know, losing touch of their reality in that process.
Yeah, it you know, what you just said makes me think of, like, people with ADHD tend to, like, not that ADHD is madness, but they tend.
Yeah, it is.
But even like you know, think of like savantism and autism and that kind of stuff. Like, I think when you break the typical, you know, and like I watch my partner right now, and in a ecstatic bout of ADHD or whatever, whether it's hyperfocus or just squirrel mentality, right? And I'm like, you are connected to so many more things than I am right now. Like I'm just like, whoa. And she talks to me about, like, how in her head there's like 30 thoughts at once. And I'm like, are you fucking nuts? Like, that sounds insane. How do you do that, right? And so I wonder, like, things like that, where it makes sense why, like, there's lots of theories about geniuses being typically neuroatypical, right?
Yeah.
Neurodivergent, because there's just like a shattering of that structure, I guess. I don't know.
Well, the collective is blessing us with a lot of neuroatypical. Neurodivergent is the term, and I think that's for a reason.
Because we need some of that now in the world.
You know, we're different, and we're showing up different sexually. We're showing up different in our mind patterns and how we engage with the world. We're showing up different in a lot of ways, and so that gets us to the idea of this collective. That in the soul realm, we go up, and when we transcend, we meet divinity, and that connects us. So I can meet you in transcendent love or transcendent peace, right? and we go down into the soul, and we are connected in this embodied energy place from which all images come from, right?
Mm-hmm.
All images, all energies come from. So the collective, Carl Jung called it the collective unconscious. In that soul realm, everything is diverging from itself, and so everything is connected there.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Well, it feels like there's it feels to me like there's more diversity there, right? There's more difference, there's more, but they're all connected. Like it's if transcendence is getting to a point, and I look at geometry, right? The first thing that comes to mind is a triangle, right? So I'm expecting that as I go more into the soul, the base of that triangle is getting bigger and bigger, and more stuff is in that, if you want to go pyramid, right? More stuff is in that bottom level, and it's an infinite fucking pyramid. So it gets huge, but it's all still connected by experience, right? And so then it almost, and this is, I have no neuroscience degree and no way of affirming this, but it almost seems to me like in a world where we are so focused on the spiritual, why wouldn't consciousness be like, oh yeah, well, here's some more neurodivergence. Here's some more ways to meet yourself that are different. Here's people who are going to challenge everything you think.
Yeah, here's people who aren't going to work in your factories.
Right.
In your restaurants for
you're trying to streamline, and that doesn't help me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, consciousness looking at the world right now would be like, this is too homogenized. This doesn't make any sense. It's not, I'm not meeting anything now, right? So it makes sense to me. I mean, it's all kind of an interesting, like trying to find the thought process behind everything is just like blowing my mind, but it's kind of a fun little thought experiment of like, if there was something just like controlling it all, actually this makes sense, you know, especially with that as the motive. Yeah. Real quick though, because we have like 9 minutes left, right? In the last episode, I asked you a question of like, how do I know I'm living a virtuous life? And your answer was like, well, we're going to talk about soul, and that's going to be the answer. So I'd love to come back to that, because as a listener, I'd be binge listening, because that's what you're supposed to do, listeners, binge listen. Okay. And then I'd be wondering, like, when are they going to get to the thing where they answer the last question? And hopefully in the last 8 minutes is where we do that. So what do we have? How does this knowledge help me know if I'm living virtuously and connect to myself? I mean, I get that part, connecting to myself, but what do I do with it?
Yeah, where does inspiration come from? Where does
I mean, there's knowledge there, right? Like
there's a difference between like knowledge and knowing, though, you know?
Yeah.
Because you can be in a situation that you've never been in before, and all of your previous experience. So that kind of knowledge where like your mind collects all your previous experience and it gives you a solution.
Right.
Like that's one way and probably the most common way we approach any given situation is through that kind of psychic process. Then there's something that's like deep in you. And
like intuition?
Yeah, it's like intuition or inspiration, and that you just like know. And that you like act from that place. And I would say that would be a soul response.
Yeah, and it's still, here's the funny thing about soul is I can only judge it for myself. But I can take on soul practices and I can see what other people do. And I suggest experience to kind of do that. Essentially what I want to do, like you said, is I want to live from somewhere deeper. Somewhere not verbal, somewhere there is no lessons, where there's no right and wrong, where it's just me happening. And I want to check in there, and I want to have a sense of that. And the more you have a sense of that, then we can call that soul landing, I guess. Even though soul is as landed as it ever will be. You know? And when we have a sense of that, then life changes. And things will actually change around us. Will contain the gravity rather than being drawn by out here. Will create the thing that's supposed to happen, and I don't know what that is. You know, my brother wanders the land and lives in his truck all the time. he introduced me to one of his friends who has been homeless since he was 16, is in the chess genius and has lived outside. And now he's near, over 40. And he's been living outside and playing chess in libraries for most of his existence.
Huh.
I cannot say that wasn't what that person was supposed to do, right? They could only do it.
Right.
Modern man, as I was raised in spirit culture and I was sent to school and told there were lessons and there was, the certain amount of things I should achieve or know to be a good human, certain amount of money I should make, certain amount of, ways I should be to others and whatever, all measured out here, all these other outside measurements. Who fucking knows? Soul doesn't care about that. Now, I can look at the scoreboard and understand that might reflect some authentic process, but I don't know that, right? Until I myself find that place. Some resources that will be really good as experiences: Care of the Soul, Thomas More, The Soul's Code by James Hillman. Anything by Jung, I would suggest, particularly as I'm reading it currently.
I definitely get that sense from you right now.
Man and His Symbols, super, super great.
Nature and the Human Soul.
Nature and the Human Soul, or Soulcraft by Bill Plotkin. He suggests 4-day vision quests where you're out in nature and you're fasting and you use symbolism and so forth to try to find something that's more essence. Time in nature generally, forest bathing at least, but maybe some extended wilderness time, and I mean real wilderness. Although that could be the tree in your backyard too. You could go sit and talk to the tree in the backyard. Talk to things that won't talk back. It's really interesting. Try things that feel a little weird, but maybe will reveal something to you. The ecstatic in all forms, be it dancing. I think there's some issues with how that's done, maybe, but also it could be really great. Art, connecting to something, letting something, not what should I draw, but what's coming through me. Right? Good artists just do that. The words come through them. They're not like, how does a good poet, or how does a good poet paint, a good painter paint? There's something else there, and it shows up in the quality and the quantity of the work that they do. So there's so many ways to connect to soul, and there's no right way to do it. See, but I know, I can sense that I just had a soul. Bill Plotkin calls them soul encounters. And once I smoked my first pipe of tobacco. I smoked, and the moon came down and was like sitting in my backyard.
OD'd on some tobacco for a bit.
Right? Now, I'd been having some issues with the idea of femininity and how it showed up in my life and how it showed up in me.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting to me. That was an encounter with soul. I have been in sexual experiences that were me encountering soul, right? I've been in nature experiences often where there's just a piece of me that lands. One was, I remember I was about to go on my Mormon mission. I was 18, and we had hiked up that fall to Lake Blanche, and I was sitting there looking at the rocks, and something landed. An image.
Soul landed?
Soul. a piece of me resonated so strongly with the environment there, with what was happening, that I remember it to this day. I remember how I felt. And when I go there, I feel that a signature of me there. There's mythology that I've read and mythology that I tell about myself and experiences that I've had are, I would say, soul encounter. And how I interpret that then becomes my own personal mythology. And that's kind of how my soul expresses. So all that is a really beautiful process. It's messy. It's individual. I can't tell you how to do it. I can guide people into that. I can help them, take their individual situation and do it. But I can't give you a broad.
There's not a one size fits all.
There's some really great resources. Start with Care of the Soul. go to Bill Plotkin and read, Soulcraft. There's lots of soul literature that I think has some good idea and practice in it.
I mean, I just from a literature standpoint and an obsession standpoint, right? I think about mythology and I think about how tied that is to virtue of some kind. Every myth is trying to explain virtue. And if we take it as the nature of mythology or the intention or the design of mythology is to explain virtue, then doing things that allow you to create, form, understand, read your own mythology would be exactly that, would be the way that you, Cedar, are finding your own virtue.
Yeah, I would say get rid of right and wrong with mythology and look at the processes that are happening. Look at the energy that's moving through that. Mythology has often been lessonized, right? Like moved into lessons or moved into this is showing right or wrong. But really what it is, it's a play, and the way I like to say it is all the characters in a good myth are you. Good ones and bad ones. And they're all playing themselves out. You have the devil and you have Jesus, and they interact, right? And this is the best way, and this is one of the best ways to really encounter soul is to just read a Shakespeare play. Shakespeare is really good at this, by the way. He was writing people, and just assume that all the characters in the play represent aspects of yourself, and all these things are happening in you. What happens, when you read it that way? It moves. It is virtue, but it moves from a virtue that relies on lessons and right and wrong and so forth into a virtue that's like, whoa, the richness of this happening.
Right.
And some of the mythology is bizarre, and if you don't read it from a place of you're looking for soul pieces, and you're looking from a spirit perspective for some, cogent religious principle,
right?
Then
it's fucking weird. Like, there's no reason that Zeus should shoot down as a lightning bolt and impregnate some woman. Like, what the fuck's going on?
Zeus is just an aspect of the psyche, right? Hera is an aspect of the psyche. The Care of the Soul does a really good job of going through and suggesting what some of those pieces are. I highly recommend that, and it'll fuck you up.
Yeah, I have a couple things. One, just a brief soul encounter kind of thing that I want to share that I feel like was helping me understand the soul spirit thing. Okay. And I was at a lake up Payson Canyon, and it was just a absolutely glorious, magical night. And I'm looking out over the pond, and a fish jumps up and eats a dragonfly. And then when it lands, like all these ripples go out.
Right.
And so I really felt this connection to just like that, like natural impulse of like, you just do the thing that you are, and you have no idea where those ripples are going to go.
Well, I mean, you also don't care. Like the fish isn't like, what will happen if I disturb the piece of the surface tension? It's like, I want a fucking dragonfly. I'm hungry. It's just
led by that impulse of hunger, right? And it's doing the fish thing. And then it was like, but also because we have access to the spirit side, we can connect to a greater consciousness that does know, that can see where the ripples will go. And that as we work with both of those concepts, we come to this place where it's like, okay, what does the natural expression that is me, how does it express in a way that honors and serves the greatest good in the greatest way? And there are parts of that we can't know, and there are parts of it that we can. But to come back to your question of how do I know if I'm being virtuous, I think we don't. There's a large part of us that doesn't know where those ripples are going to go. If I go in the bathroom and change the toilet paper roll because somebody left it off, that just seems like a natural thing that I do.
Sure.
But maybe that was purposely left off because somebody's kid was supposed to learn a lesson from it, right? I just don't know. I just do what I do, right? And then if we can pause in those moments of choice, or really be with the energy in any moment, and kind of ask, am I trying to prove something here? What am I trying to prove? So
authenticity rather than right or wrong, right?
Yeah. Am I trying to prove something? And as far as I can see and feel and know, does this honor, does this serve love?
There's also this, this next thing of acting soulful, of seeing soulful acts, and then trying to act like those people. Imitation is suicide, as Emerson said. Emerson's a real soul writer, right?
I love that. Yeah.
And the idea here is that you have to find it. Now, you can be in soul community, and you can feel people's essences and their transmissions, and you can catch it's more important to catch the resonance of what they're doing. If they're really connected, if they're really connecting, if they're really expressing artfully or in whatever way they're feeling that, then to do what they're doing. Right. I wouldn't want to go. I can go. I love to hang out with artists. I'm not a good visual artist. I can't draw shit, but I love to sit next to an artist that's arting, and it's coming through them. I love that because I can feel that energy, that process. There's something that they're making there that's coming from a place that is deeper than what I experience with a lot of people. That's just my sense.
I do think that there is some truth to fake it till you make it, but I think it's in general a longer process, and you will probably get caught up in some identity and spiritual ego stuff. So I think there's something there, but I think something that's even more powerful is to sit in the energy and just say, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it is that space of I don't know, and spirit is the space of I know I'm going to move this direction. It's like I could go sit in the canyon. Because, and maybe I'm pretending. Oh, soulful people go outside and spend time in nature.
Right, I'm going to do it because that's what everyone else does.
But the canyon is still going to teach me.
Yeah, it's like what I was talking about earlier, where it's like you can pretend to be happy and you might fuck up and accidentally be happy sometimes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you can be like, I'm going to go to the canyon because everybody meditates. You get out there, you're like, well, shit, I just accidentally meditated. Like,
there's a process there that isn't controllable or knowable, but it's also undeniable. So thank you so much for spending this time with us for the Conversations with Life podcast. We've enjoyed this conversation. Would love any comments or questions you have, and enjoy the rest of the podcasts. We're building a pretty good library here, and go enjoy if you like this one, go enjoy the rest of them. Thank you so much for your time. We've enjoyed this as well, and have a beautiful day.